What we're experiencing right now is one of the most heartbreaking weeks in American history, certainly in Minnesotan history. We woke up at the beginning of this week to, as we all know, a disgusting, disturbing video of Mr. George Floyd being wrongfully killed. He was unarmed. He was not aggressive. He begged for his life. He called for his mom, and bystanders screamed, "This man is dying." And over the course of a 10-minute video, we see the life squeezed out of Mr. Floyd. Anger over his death is understandable. Sadness, pain, heartache, frustration is legitimate. We have in our community right now an enormous number of people of all ages, of all races, of all backgrounds, who agree that Mr. Floyd should still be alive. We have in our community an enormous number of people of all ages, of all races, of all backgrounds, of all neighborhoods, who are looking to see not only one, but all four of the officers involved in his death be fully held accountable. We have an enormous number of people in our community who are heartbroken by the fact that the name George Floyd does not stand alone in history, but that it joins a too long and too rapidly growing list of names of unarmed, unaggressive African-American men who've lost their lives wrongfully at the hands of law enforcement. And the frustration that time and time again we've seen no one held accountable. We have an enormous amount of legitimate frustration of people who ask, when? How long will it take? People who ask, how egregious does it have to be? People who ask, how blatant does it how well documented does it have to be for someone to be held accountable for George Floyd's murder? That frustration, that pain is real and it's legitimate. And to all of the people in our community who believe what I just said, who wholeheartedly need the world to hear that Mr. Floyd should be alive, that someone should be held accountable, and that we as a community, we as a culture, we as a society must do everything we can imagine to keep this from happening again, we stand with you. I stand with you. There are many, many ways for us to work together in a constructive manner that builds our communities, that empowers our communities to speak up with a loud voice. The world is listening. There are opportunities for us to do that in a constructive manner. Unfortunately, there are also those among us who would seek to use this moment, who would seek to use his death as an excuse, as a cover, to agitate for the destruction of those same communities that have been most traumatized by George Floyd's death. Those same communities that have been most traumatized by the dual crisis of a COVID-19 pandemic and an economic crisis that we're facing right now. Those same communities are being re-traumatized right now as our Black-owned barbershops, as our immigrant-owned restaurants, as our local, generational, family-owned businesses are damaged and destroyed night after night. This must stop. I know the governor, I know Mayor Fry, myself, wholeheartedly support the right of people to protest, the right of free speech for people to say what they believe about the world, to speak up and say and participate in making this world a better place, that right to speak stops at destruction of lives, destruction of property, destruction of livelihood. In St. Paul last night, and across our Twin Cities, a curfew went into effect. Because we had a relative stillness in St. Paul, we didn't make an enormous number of arrests, but every single person we arrested last night, I'm told, was from out of state. What we are seeing right now is a group of people who are not from here. As I talk to my friends who have been in this movement for a very long time, who wake up in this movement every day, and I ask them what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, to a person, I hear them say, we don't know these folks. We don't know these folks who are agitating. We don't know these folks who are inciting violence. We don't know these folks who are first in to break a window. And those folks who are agitating and inciting are taking advantage of the pain, of the hurt, of the frustration, of the anger, of the very real and legitimate sadness that so many of our community members feel, to advocate for the destruction of our communities. I echo the governor's statements, I echo the mayor's statements, in that our police officers, our firefighters are facing something they've never faced before. That alone would be very, very difficult to address. One thing that I've learned about the world, about Minnesota, and certainly about St. Paul, is every time ugliness raises its head in our community, the beauty of community, that beautiful spirit that Paul Wellstone once spoke about when he said we all do better when we all do better, arises. Across the Twin Cities yesterday, across St. Paul yesterday, we saw countless neighbors show up for each other. We saw people show up with a broom and a bucket, a rag to clean, and just work together. They weren't cleaning their cousin's store or their uncle's store. They were just coming to help each other, to clean up our city. Over the last couple of months, thanks to the fact that we in Minnesota have a governor who took strong action early to protect Minnesotans in this pandemic crisis, we showed that togetherness by staying home. We showed that togetherness by honoring the stay-at-home orders that our governor has executed. And those efforts resulted in saving lives in our community. Right now, today, this week in Minnesota, we must show that same sense of togetherness. We must show that same sense of unity. We must show that same sense of community and cohesion as we stand forward to say, we will not accept the brutal killing of unarmed black men. We will not accept George Floyd's death, and we will not accept the destruction of our communities either. Those two things, those two values, those two goals are not in competition. They're not in conflict with one another. Actually, they're one and the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. Commissioner Harrington.